So Guy, your advocacy for freedom of speech is well known, and as mentioned previously, you're actively involved in broadcast and non-broadcast regulation. So what I want to ask you is, how do you reconcile these seemingly divergent interests between freedom of speech but regulated advertising, and what principles guide your approach to balancing the promotion of free expression with the need for responsible advertising?
So for me, self-regulation is absolutely fundamental to freedom of expression. It's not anathema to it, it's part of it. The ability of the advertising industry and the ability of newspapers and those involved in editorial as well to be governed by their own self-regulatory mechanisms is absolutely crucial to freedom of speech. What is abhorrent in a free society, and what would be disastrous for the industry, is the heavy hand of statute and of law to become involved in how we operate. Can you imagine the cap code, for instance, having to be changed by law the entire time, given that it takes sometimes 3 or 4 years to get a bill through Parliament? It would absolutely destroy the system. So we need at all costs to ensure that the state does not become involved in our regulation.
So as we've discussed on many occasions, and we've even hosted dinners on this particular subject, it's often noted that while general advertising is subject to heavy regulations, quite rightly, to protect consumers, political advertising remains largely unregulated. Considering this disparity, do you believe political advertising should be subjected to regulation? What are your reasons for this?
So I find this an immensely difficult and complicated subject, as we've discussed at various IPM events in the past. As somebody who was actively involved in campaigning, at the campaigning end of politics, particularly at the start of my career, but also when I worked in the 2005 general election, there are huge practical difficulties in regulating advertising during the course of an election campaign. And under normal circumstances, you've got an ad, somebody complains about it, the ASA can take its time to look at it, see whether it measures up to the code, and deal with it. In political campaigning, things are moving by the hour, not even by the day or by the week. And the controversy arises: how are you supposed to regulate something in those circumstances without actually interfering in the political process? So there are huge practical difficulties, I think, with trying to regulate political advertising. And also there is a danger that it would drag the ASA, which is a world-class regulator, into political disputes, which is often very dangerous territory. However, having said all that, I think I'm slightly changing my mind on the subject. It's partly because of the threat posed to democracy by fake news, often powered by AI over time. But secondly, I'm afraid I don't want to open old wounds, but the whole experience of the Brexit bus and the £350 million on the side did actually stop and make me think, is it right that this sort of thing isn't subjected to some form of regulation to ensure that it's accurate? I can't give the answer to it, but I'm on a journey, Graham.
I know that other countries have tried to regulate advertising. There was an experiment in Australia. And for the reasons you've outlined, it didn't quite work. So in theory, it makes absolute sense that political advertising should be regulated, but in practice, because of the timescales involved, can it?
That's the $1,000 question.